Welcome to the Josh Bolton Show, where we dive into interesting and inspiring conversations. And now, your host, Josh Bolton.
Welcome, everybody. Today we have Alicia, Butler, Pierre. We're going to go over so many fun things from her advice on how businesses really fail to her journey of reinventing herself and her shiny object syndrome cure, because I'm really curious about that with ADHD. Here she is.
Well, thank you, Josh. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
The pleasure is mine. So actually, it was your assistant reached out to me on Matchmaker, and she said we met on LinkedIn, and I was like, we did? I went to LinkedIn, I'm like, no, we didn't, but I'm adding her anyways.
Okay. That's funny. Well, like, we're all connected now, right? Or we should be. Okay, good.
It was just one of those. She said, like, yeah, you guys connected on LinkedIn. I'm like, we did? I don't remember this.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, yeah, we'll have to look into that.
Oh, yeah. I'm like following you and all that. But it was just one of those. I'm like, oh, she got me thinking. I guess I have to go follow her now. So tell us about yourself, where you're from, kind of thing.
I am originally from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I currently live in Atlanta, Georgia, and I've been here in Atlanta for 16 years. Dang. And I can remember it like it were yesterday.
I want to say there's a lot of cold and hurricanes in Georgia.
No, honestly, not where I live. Really? Because Atlanta is so far inland. No, we don't get hurricane. Now where I'm from, yes, Louisiana is very hurricane prone. You know, especially southern Louisiana. In fact, I moved here from New Orleans. I moved here 6 months before Hurricane Katrina. Wow. So yeah, I dodged the bullet.
Yes, you did.
Big time.
Feels bad for whoever bought your house.
Yeah. So, and it was such an eerie feeling, to be honest with you, to know that I escaped or I left. And what's funny, Josh, I was in New Orleans the weekend before Hurricane Katrina. And I remember getting off the plane, feeling like I couldn't breathe. And people were like, oh my God, Alicia, you've grown up here. You know the weather, you know, it's hot, you know, it's humid, and you've been in Atlanta for a few months and you act like you can't even, get acclimated back to Louisiana weather. But there was something energetically that was just going on. And yeah, a week later, Hurricane Katrina happened.
That's the highest definition of gut instinct right there.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, what do you do specifically for work?
So I own a company called Equilibria. Okay. And it's an operations management firm. And what we do is we create business infrastructure for fast-growing small businesses. And the reason that's really important, Josh, is because some businesses, especially when they're first starting out, they fail because they don't have enough customers. But what happens when you've done such a great job at marketing and branding and PR and promoting your company? You actually can have a different type of problem. You can have more customers than you can handle. And that's where business infrastructure comes into play, because it helps identify the people, the processes, and the tools and technologies that you need in place to not only be able to sustain that fast growth, but to be able to replicate it and do so profitably.
Right. Yeah, that's a big one I've learned from all my different guests. One of them jokingly said, but I think he wasn't joking. It's like, write everything down from the greeter and what they must do, all the protocols, to the supervisor, to the manager. And he said, even write your protocols down.
Absolutely. You have to.
I just sat there jokingly. I'm like, what, like Batman, like killing all the Justice League's weaknesses and then his own?
No, it's so true. That is sage advice.
Yeah, because how he phrased it, because he's like, what happens if you get COVID and you're down for 2 weeks?
Mm-hmm.
You can't move.
That's exactly right.
He's like, who's going to step up? Like, what if you get a big client and you don't have written down, if so-and-so calls, he's cool. Tell him Josh is sick, call us in like a week or two. But if he's like, if you don't have that, they're not going to know. They think you're rude and stop business with you. And I was like, interesting. I never thought of it that way.
Very true. That is very true. Yes. So that was very good advice.
It was. So then what are some of the things you see with small business owners with their infrastructure that they just, if they had a little nudge, it could have been better for them? Of course, they need to call you though.
It manifests itself, the need or the conversation around building business infrastructure. It comes from different places. So maybe I can just share with you some of the more common ones that I've seen.
Okay.
One of them is you're growing like crazy because of COVID. Now you realize, people are starting to pay attention to your business a little bit more. Now you have, again, maybe more business than you can handle. You almost always in those situations have to hire more people. Well, when you hire those people, Josh, they need to know not only what work they need to perform, but how to perform that work. So that gets back into those processes that your other guest was talking to you about. So that's one major thing, is that they realize they need to staff up. They need to expand their team. And They have no idea who they need to recruit. They may not have any job descriptions in place. So that's something that we actually help them put in place. Another thing that can happen is they might run a business that's heavily regulated, and they may have failed an audit, or they may have received some type of penalty, some type of fine or fee because they did not have certain things in place from an operations standpoint.
Okay.
I'll never forget, true story. This was several years ago, actually back in New Orleans. I was working with a client there. They have I'll just say they're in the healthcare space.
Okay.
And because they receive funding, part of the funding from the federal government via Medicaid and Medicare, there are certain protocols, and I mean, it's healthcare, so of course it has to be regulated. So they received I would say maybe an extra layer of regulation. And it was very interesting because the organization, the governing body that performed this audit, they had this checklist. So they tell you in advance what they will be looking for. And almost every service that my company provides was in one way or another listed on this checklist. So it had things like your records management system. How are you keeping things electronically versus, physical paper files? It talked about having an organizational chart that could actually be shared, very easily shared with anyone who may request a copy. It also talked about having a clear workspace plan. How is your workspace actually laid out? Even if someone who's listening right now is just a solopreneur working from home thinking, well, that doesn't apply to me. I just work, it's me, I'm by myself, I'm a freelancer, solopreneur, I work from home. You still need to have your workspace laid out in a way that is most conducive to your efficiency as well as productivity.
Right.
And the other two things, job descriptions as well as those processes, making sure you have key processes documented. And I'll never forget, the owner of that company saw no value in any of those things. Absolutely no value in it. And that was really interesting to me. And I had to tell that CEO, this is one of many ways that this governing auditing agency can ensure that you are actually operating on the up and up. Basically, that all of your I's are dotted, all of your T's are crossed. And when they see that you have some of these basic things in place, it gives them the assurance that you're running a legitimate business.
Right.
So for those who might be listening right now and may also be thinking the same thing, oh gosh, really? Do I have to have an org chart for my company? Yes. Do I have to document these processes? Yes. Even if it's something as simple as a short video that you record on your phone. I think when we think about processes, Josh, we still think of back in the day when you had these big, thick, bulky manuals, and there were pages and pages of step-by-step instructions on how to do things. But we're all so mobile now, and especially because of COVID, things have become even more digitized. People are on the go. It doesn't have to be these long, drawn-out step-by-step procedures. Again, it could be something as simple as a quick 3 to 5 minute video, as long as the person who is receiving that information actually knows how to do whatever it is you are explaining, then you have done your job in terms of capturing and documenting that process. So whether you want to draw a flow chart, you want to record an actual video, or you may want to write out step by step by step how to do something, the choice is yours. What matters at the end of the day is that the recipient, the person who is going to be trained using that documentation, can actually walk away from that documentation and be able to do the work that you've just described.
Wow. That's one of those, like, I've had multiple jobs and no one's done that. Like, I did security at one point in my life, and literally they just threw me at the gate and said, good luck.
Yep.
And I'm like, but what am I supposed to do? Like this, what am I looking at? It took me like 2 years. I actually had a thick book. I had a thick book, and I actually knew everything I was supposed to do. And actually people would come to me to figure out the rules. My own supervisor would be like, Josh, can we borrow your book really quick? I'm like, yes, but you better bring it back.
Oh, you should have charged them for that, Josh.
I did. I was at a certain point it was. I'm like, no. It's $5 insurance. Give it to me.
No, but that's great. And what happens is when you don't have those types of things in place. So imagine what you just shared was perfect. Imagine if you got in trouble because you didn't do something correctly. Mm-hmm. Well, can they really? They can fire you, obviously, but they don't have real cause and justification because no one ever trained you.
Right.
No one ever provided you documentation to support the training that you may or may not have received.
Right.
So I always tell business owners, we should always blame the process before we blame the people. It's so easy to point fingers at other people and say, well, Josh didn't do what I told him to do. Well, did you have it documented? No, but he should have known. Like, no, we don't communicate telepathically. You have to write. I know, right? And we can't make assumptions. So the best thing to do is and yes, I get it. It's not fun. It's not the most exciting thing in the world to do, but if you do it once, it will save you a lot of headache. And then it's just a matter of updating it because things will change. I mean, think about all of the businesses, Josh, that have had to change the way they do things because of COVID. Mm-hmm. From contactless operations to, okay, we didn't have a web presence before, but now maybe we need to have a website. All of these different things, all of the different ways that multiple companies have had to figure out how to pivot. So again, you just go back to your operations, your processes, and you make those updates, or sometimes you might have to create new ones altogether. But the point is this: you want to set up that solid foundation.
Yeah, no, 100%. That was kind of actually the thing you pointed out, like you getting written up, but you don't know why. Like I wasn't taught that. That's literally why I started that book, because I had a track record. I wasn't delinquent or anything, but I had like 35 write-ups at one point.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they were just writing me up for their problems. And I actually wrote, I'm like, you're writing me up for something you never showed me.
Yeah.
I'm like, And I first one I signed because I didn't know the rule. After that, I never signed them. I just wrote, yeah, you never showed me that.
Good for you.
They all got real pissed with me.
But it's the truth. It's the truth. And it doesn't always, the truth hurts sometimes. It's not always pleasant, right? But yes, that's such a great example that you shared.
Yeah. That's where my current employer called them and they're like, yeah, he had 35 write-ups. He actually asked me like, why do you have so many write-ups? I'm like, because they blame me for their problems. And he's like, oh, okay, never mind. You're fucking. But so then what are the biggest trends, the macro you're seeing with the COVID, especially because we touched on it, for operations? And I'm hoping they're calling you more too.
Oh my gosh, yes. I think we were talking right before we started recording about how crazy busy I am. Josh, this is the busiest I've ever been in the summer in 16 years of being in business.
Because isn't summer like the lull for everything?
For me, definitely. And so that's when I'm usually focusing on my company's processes and trying to get some of those back office type things in place. That's the time to do it when things are a little slow.
Right.
But right now, it is just the train left the station back in 2020. And I don't know if it's coming back, Josh. I mean, it is just full steam ahead. Yeah. The macro thing that I'm noticing from an operations and business infrastructure perspective is supply chain management, supply chain challenges and issues. And I teach a class at this small school in Massachusetts called Nichols College, and we dedicated an entire lecture just talking about supply chain. And it's interesting because many of the students were accusing certain companies of price gouging. And I had to show them a schematic that shows you don't always have control, depending on where you fall in the supply chain. You're just taking on the burden that may be happening further upstream, things that you have absolutely no control over. The price of lumber, for example. We've all been hearing about, oh my gosh, you go to Home Depot or Lowe's and it's just out of control. What are these companies doing? It's so unfair. But what people don't understand is the amount of time that it's taking now to actually ship goods here into our country. And then once it arrives at the port, it now has to be placed on a truck or maybe a rail car before it actually gets to the stores. And so all of these systems have been compromised because of labor shortages.
It's still a problem too.
It's still a problem, Josh. It's still a problem. So that is something that's prevalent, a pressing need. It's impacting us in ways that we can't even imagine. There's a tool that I use when I'm working with my clients. It's these laminated stick figures.
Okay.
Just last Friday, I spoke to the company that actually produces these for me. And they said, Alicia, we have a slight problem. Yeah, those laminating sheets that we use to make these stick figures for you, there's a serious back order, because they can't get over here from overseas quickly enough. So it's not their fault. And it's not my fault if I'm unable to supply this or provide this to my customers. Right. This is something I literally have no control over. And so I get it. We all get frustrated, I'm sure, when you're trying to go to your favorite restaurant and their hours of operation have changed because they don't have the food supply that they used to, and they don't have the labor supply that they used to. Then we still have these, okay, do we wear a mask? Do we not wear a mask? Can we convene inside of the restaurant? Do we have to sit outside? Everything is just in flux right now. And I think we have to be patient, as difficult as that is, and we have to extend each other grace, right?
100%.
Things happen, and I'm noticing some people still get bent out of shape. if a meeting is missed or gets postponed or whatever the case may be. But especially in these times, we just have to be a lot more understanding and a lot more graceful.
Oh, yeah, totally. Like, I saw on the internet where all these people are like yelling at the clerks and it's not even their fault. They're like, why is it taking so long?
Yeah.
And the clerk's just taking it. And it was just one of those, where I'm at a grocery store. I work nighttime, so I don't have to deal with usually the customers. Usually there are those weird ones that come right at 6. But it was one of those, it was a bad day. I had to work like extra 2 hours, and a customer outright came up to me and just started cursing and belittling me.
Oh my goodness.
And it was just one of those, I'm so used to working nighttime, so we just snap at each other just cause. And I just looked, I'm like, the person straight faced, because it was a female. I'm like, did you not have sex last night?
Oh, wow.
And then I looked up, I'm like, oh, that's a customer.
Oh, wow.
And it was just one of those, I looked up like, sorry, old habits die hard. Can I help you with anything?
Yeah, but so again, so many of us are on edge. We've been cooped up inside for a long time. We were able to get out, and now it looks like we might have to start going back inside. So it's again, there's always uncertainty. I mean, that's life, but the degree of uncertainty is what has changed significantly, and it has many of us on edge. And I know mental health is a topic that is also, again, just in terms of answering your question about some macro trends, so supply chain and also mental health, being able to cope with all of this, because going back to the labor shortages that so many different organizations are experiencing, and it's not just restaurants. It's the whole world. I've been places where, I go to Starbucks every Monday morning. So they recently had opened up my local Starbucks. They had opened up their dining cafe, where you could actually go inside. They did that for a few weeks, and then they had to close it right back. And they told me the reason was because it wasn't because of COVID. It was because they didn't have enough staff to be able to service customers inside the cafe as well as coming through the drive-through. So now they're back to drive-through only. So this is how it's manifesting itself. And so for those employees who have been working already before the pandemic, they have even more stress and even more pressure being added onto them. And that's where the mental health conversation starts to come into play, because so many of us now are working unbelievable amounts of hours. And then to have the added stress of dealing with angry customers who are frustrated because they can't receive products and services the way they used to. And unfortunately, they may take it out on someone like you, Josh.
And then I rudely come back. But that it's so true. Like when this all was happening, by the way, to touch on your lumber, the reason everything went up is the lumber contracts for the futures went up a lot, kind of thing. And that's where I was just like, when you said that, I'm like, yes, the supply chain, but like the contract itself was the linchpin of it all. But side note, that's where for the labor shortage, like for us, oh my gosh, like we can't keep people longer than a week because they're like, oh, you treat us terrible. We don't feel comfortable. They just leave. And I'm like,
wow.
Yeah, that's another one I'm noticing. Just it's not just California.
The turnover
has just gone insane.
Wow. Yeah, it's and especially if people know they have other options, they're not going to put up with anybody's BS.
Right.
They'll just quit and go somewhere else. Even the place, the massage place that I go to, Massage Envy, they need therapists. They need massage therapists. They can't keep enough there. So it's just literally, it's almost every business that, whether we're talking about the airlines are having to cancel flights again because they don't have the flight attendants. They don't have the pilots. It's wild. The question is, where the heck did everybody go?
That's been my question, because last I checked, the unemployment's it's still high-ish, but it's not unreasonable kind of thing. And it's like the question, like, where did everyone go?
Mm-hmm.
Someone brought up, and I thought it was interesting. He said it more rough. I'll make it more polite. Essentially, he said a lot of where all these workers were, he's like, they weren't legal. He's like, so he's like, it was just one of those, he's like, they can't record them. They were recording everyone on the books. He's like, a majority of them were working behind the scene kind of thing.
Yeah. But again, even in IT, I hear that there's shortages of cybersecurity experts and database experts and coding experts. So it's at every level within an organization, and every type of industry. So it's not just the back office, behind the scenes, off the grid, off the record type employees. It's seriously, I mean, any type of business you name, they need people right now.
Well, what was it? Some article I was reading back in 2020 was saying in the 3 months from the March lockdowns till April, like May, June, that 3 months was the equivalent of 5 years of growth instantly.
Yeah, I believe it. So I believe it.
And that's where maybe it would have taken us 5 years to get to this point, but by then we would have had enough people coming in and going. But yeah, to just go from 0 to 1,000 in like 2 days.
It was insane. Crazy. Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm thinking. Is like, yes, technically these jobs need to be filled, but it's like, this is like the hypothetical. We should have waited 5 years kind of thing, but we had no choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that way, to your point, the labor shortage, the labor supply could have grown along with the growth of these companies. Right. But yes, right now we just have a misalignment and we're trying to catch up.
We're trying. That's definitely for sure. It's a very, like we were saying, uncertain for the future, but it's like, it seems extra uncertain for some reason.
Yeah. And it's unnerving.
It really is.
It's very unnerving. Yeah.
Especially for those in industries where like they need to delegate, where normally maybe they would have done it themselves, but like, I'm going to hire you kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But then it's like, oh wait, this receptionist could leave in like 10 days. She knows all my personal information. What is she going to do with it?
Right.
Because someone else is going to pay her $1 extra.
Right. Or think about those people who, an event planner, for example, if you're planning a large conference and you're trying to figure out, do I do this in person or do I do this remotely? And if you do go through the trouble of planning an in-person event, and then a month before that event, it looks like, I don't think we can do this now. So you have to quickly change and pivot. So I think it's just causing a lot more stress and strain that did not exist before, because you have to be able to turn things around very, very quickly. And we're all having to adopt some type of a hybrid approach. So for those who may have had only an in-person type operation, now they have to figure out, okay, how can we still be able to provide our products and services in person, but also be able to deliver that in a remote way as well?
Oh, yeah.
And vice versa. Yeah.
This one couple I had on the show a while ago, they invited me to their online summit. It was like, I think the equivalent of like a $3,000 class they gave me for free, but it was all online and it was fun. I picked their brains, but essentially like we're excited because this is never online. Mm-hmm. We're going to be like meeting up in person this place, and like, oh, you showed up here free if you go to there. Literally, they sent an email like a couple days later because I was thinking like, that's not going to work.
Oh, wow.
Literally a couple days later, it's like, okay, so we can't go in person, so it's online summit again.
Oh, wow. Yeah, see, and it's heartbreaking.
It really
because
is.
Yeah, you get your hopes set, and again, I don't know how you feel about this, Josh, but when I went to a large podcast conference, we were talking about it right before we started recording, but I went to the podcast movement conference a few weeks ago. And there's no comparison to being able to be somewhere face to face, meet people, network, have these impromptu meetings, decide to meet others for lunch, possibly even dinner. You can't do that in a remote environment. I've attended many webinars and conferences and summits online, and it's just not the same. Don't get me wrong. The material and the information that's presented is still very good, but it's all of those other things, being able to meet other people and have these impromptu conversations and, oh, would you like to join us for lunch, Josh? It's those kinds of things that just can't happen in a remote environment.
Right. Like what the guests can't see is I see you're burning an incense in the corner.
Oh, yes. You can see that?
Yeah, it's coming through real clear. At first I was looking at your mic stand. I'm like, how is there like a shimmer? Oh, that's smoke. But see, like it would be one of those, if we were in person, I'd be able to smell that.
Right. Well, it's not champa, in case you're wondering.
Yeah, it's just when you mentioned that, like, yeah, I would have been very curious to smell that. I was like, what is it?
Wow, you have great eyesight.
Thank you. But yeah, there's not much that can be an in-person. Like, I'm like itching for just a conference at this point, even if it's an accountant conference. Like, I'll go. Yeah. I don't care anymore.
Right. No, it was great to get out. It really was, and making sure you're protecting yourself and being careful. But again, it was just the number of people that you meet and can actually have conversations with, because even with those online summits, many of them have a networking portion to their platform, but it's just not the same. And
I think by 2023 sounds far, but I think by 2023, it should level out. Sort of.
I hope so.
My, one of the doctors, I used to go to a church, and he was talking to my sister, and he's apparently like the go-to expert for family flu virality and all that. Like he's like the expert in flu, essentially.
Okay.
And he was explaining, he's like, COVID, yes, it's different, but it acts exactly the same as the flu. And he's like, it's going to take at least 3 years by 2023 for it to do. He said something, we haven't even hit our second peak. He's like, we have not hit the second wave. Everyone thinks we have. He's like, we haven't.
No, well, I do know that because of some behind the scenes stuff that I know from a supply chain perspective. Yeah.
And that was one, when he was telling my sister, and she told us, just like, when that second wave, he's like, Delta's bad, but they're like, that second one's going to be worse. And that's what's going to get us all.
Well, thank you for that, Josh.
I told my sister, I'm like, oh.
Wow, I feel so much better now.
I'm like, that's so great. Thank you. But plus side, a little smiley face on top of the drop of the eyelid there. He said actually getting the vaccination, he's like, it's not a cure-all, but it makes the ride much easier, more manageable.
Okay.
And that's where I got it back in December 2020. Man, I was down for like 2 weeks. I couldn't function.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. There was like 2 days I don't even remember. Apparently I was super functional, talking to everyone, eating. I don't remember it.
Oh my goodness.
But I never got the classic signs like losing smell, losing taste. I just got hot flashes, freezing cold. And then my body ate.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, and then the lung. Yeah, the corona lung I got though. Like literally walking from here to like the restroom, which is like maybe 8 feet away, felt like a marathon to get to the toilet. Oh
goodness.
I was like, just like crawling in.
That is amazing. It's really amazing to hear, from people who've had it and have survived it, to hear the variation in in symptoms and things that they had to go through. Wow.
Yeah. The air quote corona lungs lasted. So February, when we kind of tried to hint on going in to gyms again. So I went and did the stair steppers and was doing all that. And we got my lungs back together by March, but then it's like now it's the gym. I guess they're trying to close them again in California, but the gym's like, no, we're good. We'll just make everyone wear a mask.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm like, this whole on and on switch of the economy. That's
I know.
super dangerous.
I know. It's, yeah. Yeah.
So, okay, what's your take on that? Because you definitely be an operations person and just also a savvy businesswoman. What is your take on the potential ramifications of this roulette of on and off? If it's too triggering or too far.
Yes, I'm trying to figure out what is a less politically charged answer to give.
Yeah.
Politically correct answer to give.
There's not. So
don't be mad at me, but it's like it depends, and it really does depend. I would just encourage anyone who's listening to us right now to really put in place a business continuity plan.
What's that? I haven't heard of that before.
A business continuity plan is for things exactly what we're talking about. So if there is a natural disaster, a pandemic, fire, theft, flood, anything that can happen that you have no control over, but that can greatly impact your ability to operate on a day-to-day basis. A business continuity plan basically says, okay, in the event one of these things happens, this is our plan to make sure we can get our operations, if not fully functional, at least partially functional within the next 24 to 48 hours. So you're basically trying to make sure you have steps and a plan in place so that in the event something does happen, and something will happen, I mean, it's life, and right. These things are unpredictable, whether it's, you're in California, it could be an earthquake, it could be a tornado, it could be a fire. Also, the fires in California.
Those you just never right now.
I know. You just never know. And there's always something. And it's right. Something every single business, regardless of industry, should have in place. It could be a cybersecurity breach, Josh.
Those are so creepishly common now too.
Yes. And definitely for small businesses. So what would you do if your system was somehow hacked or compromised? So just thinking through these things ahead of time puts you in a much better position to be able to react if and when one of those situations actually takes place. So a business continuity plan would include your communications plan. How are you going to disseminate information to your team, to your customers, to your vendors? In terms of processes or some of the different systems you may use, let's take, for example, so, I'm from Louisiana originally, so we have hurricanes. And I think it's so easy for us to take for granted being able to pick up our cell phones, our smartphones, and make a phone call. Well, when Hurricane Katrina happened, you couldn't reach anyone, but you could send a text message. It was the strangest thing. You could send text messages, but you could not make a phone call to anyone who had a 504 area code. So how are you going to communicate with your, of course you need to be able to communicate with your friends and your family, but if you're a business owner, how are you going to communicate with your staff? What if what if your phone was destroyed? What if your phone was lost in the fire? Do you have other ways and other means of communicating? This is where, believe it or not, something like social media can become incredibly helpful and useful. Mm-hmm. So if you aren't able to make a phone call, maybe you could, if all of you were linked together on LinkedIn or maybe Instagram or something like that, you at least still have the benefit of sending each other direct messages through one of those platforms. Or if you were using a tool like Slack and any type of instant messaging or chatting system or tool if for some reason your primary mode of communication, which might normally be phone, for whatever reason is no longer an option at the moment. So it's just, again, it's playing in a way, it's almost like playing devil's advocate. You're constantly thinking, what could go wrong? And if that one particular thing does happen, how would we respond in a way that doesn't completely paralyze our operations for more than 48 hours? That's right. Really what you're trying to do in a business continuity plan.
So what I'm hearing is the backup plan to the backup plan.
Right. The backup plan to the backup plan. I like that. Yes. Yes. You have to have that. You have to have it. You have to have it because, again, something will happen. It could be theft. What if someone steals something from you?
And it doesn't have to be physical anymore.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
Data is just as valuable or even more valuable than your blue mug that you own.
Correct. Or that beautiful microphone that you have there. You know, if someone stole your microphone, how would you be able to conduct your podcast the next day?
You know what's funny? I like how you said the business continuity plan because I immediately thought insurance.
Yes.
And that's where I do martial arts. One of the guys I work out with is an insurance guy. I'm like, hey, I have a podcast. I'm going to be eventually forming an LLC once I get money. But what I know in the LLC, I need insurance. And he's like, oh, it's just a home-based business. I'm like, yeah. He's like, $500 for the year. They'll replace up to $20,000 equipment. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, $500 for the year, and you'll replace $20,000 worth of equipment. He's like, yeah. He's like, I don't get why people don't buy it. He's like, you're a fancy mic? Done. They steal your computer? Done.
That's right. They don't know, Josh.
Right.
That's why your podcast is so important. The fact that we're having this conversation right now, there might be someone who's listening who it's just never computed, or they may have thought that it just financially was out of reach.
Right. And that was just one of those, because he knows I'm like learning the market and all that. And I mentioned him like, so it's like an option, except it never expires as long as you pay it. And he's like, pretty much. He's like, and the longer you're with us, there might be like the premium goes up too. Mm-hmm. Well, the premium that we give you, you don't pay us. And I'm like, oh, so if like I hypothetically had $100,000 worth of equipment, he's like, we probably have to change your plan a little, but yeah, we could probably cover up to 300,000 for like 10,000 for the year. I was like, that's still a really good ratio. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said something else that just as we've been discussing throughout the course of this interview, as you scale your operations, so as you invest in more toys and bigger and better equipment, then yes, your coverage would likely have to be upgraded as well.
And that's when you really have to take into consideration the percentage of the product. Actually, the conference people I was talking to, they showed like Nike and how they budget everything. So I guess it's 51% of what they make goes to their athletes and sponsorship, like advertising. Then it's like small stuff. Like I didn't even think about like rent is 1% of any shoe sold. Payroll is like 5% of anything sold. And there's like all these different percentages. And I'm like, and one of them was liability insurance. And I was like, huh. But that was like a percent, but it was just one of those like interesting. So most of it they pay for advertising, but they have everything else too. I'm like, huh.
Those operating expenses. Yes, indeed.
And that's when it clicked for me. I'm like, oh, like if you don't even like calculate in the electricity you're using to do like a podcast like this, you could be really in the hole and not know it.
That's absolutely correct. Which leads to a whole, that's getting into your accounting processes.
Oh yeah.
Which is one of the processes that I always recommend is knowing your company's chart of accounts. What are all of those expenses and how is it categorized and organized? And that's where you could really benefit from the counsel of an accountant or a CPA, or maybe even a really, really good bookkeeper to help you think through all of those things. Mm-hmm. And to your point, as you're coming up with your company's pricing strategy.
Because maybe you selling that cheap little doodad for like $10 could hypothetically work if you're trying to like get known, but to sustain it, you might need to sell it for $40.
That's right.
Kind of thing.
That's right.
But you didn't take in all the pricing, so you're just literally shooting yourself in the foot.
And that's why when people start accusing certain companies of price gouging, and it's you always have to consider, what is that company's cost? What does it literally cost them to be able to produce that product or to provide that service? And they have to be able to turn a profit.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And that's the biggest one. Like my coworkers know I'm in the business, like mindset, and I do this show. And one of them, he was saying something like, oh, why is like toilet paper, when we had that huge problem with toilet paper?
Yep.
He's like, why is toilet paper like 30, 35 a thing? It was like 20, 15, like a couple of weeks ago. I'm like, because like supply and demand, like there's a lot of demand, not enough supply.
So it forces the price up. Yep.
I said, eventually,
basic economics.
I'm like, it's supply and demand, my friend. It's not that hard unless you didn't pay attention.
And, I think because also, Josh, the way information like that is presented, especially in mainstream media. So if you don't have exposure to business and business concepts, it could just seem like, oh my God, they're taking advantage of us. Now, there are instances, let's be clear, there are definitely instances when people and companies are truly taking advantage of you, but you hit the nail on the head with the toilet paper example. Right. That is the classic law of supply and demand. As demand goes up and you can't supply it, you have to raise the price to be able to choke the demand, basically. So that's how that works.
It was funny, because I work nighttime, I went to go get like Jack in the Box, and it was during like the creepy, like no one's on the road kind of thing. And I pulled up to Jack in the Box. I had cash, and the guy's like, I spent all my money in toilet paper. Can I buy my Jack in the Box with toilet paper? And I sat there, and I'm generally leaning out the window, like, is this gonna work? And the manager's like, you know what? I need toilet paper. I'll buy his meal.
You know what? That is very clever. The bartering system. Hey,
it still works.
Yes, it still works. So good for him.
Well, yeah, I'm literally like leaning out the window, like, is this actually gonna work? But yeah, that was the one thing I told my coworkers, and they were like, wait, he has toilet paper? I'm like, we work at a grocery store. There's toilet paper everywhere. by come 6:30, that was going to be gone.
Yeah.
So we're getting near the end of the time that I got you for. Do you want anything specific, like on the shiny object syndrome, and then where everyone can contact you?
Okay, sure. So shiny object syndrome is something that plagues individuals and companies alike. And it doesn't matter what size company we're talking about. But that's basically, Josh, when a new technology comes out and people just go nuts, and they go and they invest in these different technologies. It could actually be equipment. It could be the latest iPhone, whatever it is. And they make these investments without understanding, how is this going to help improve the way you're currently operating your business?
Right.
And what can happen, especially with software, it looks great. It can do that new software. Oh man, it can do everything but pay your bills for you. It's not until you actually purchase that software, you download it, and then you realize, oh, wait a minute, this doesn't communicate with other software that I'm using. So now it's actually going to take me twice as long to perform this particular function, because I have to enter this information into 3 different places.
Oof.
But if this technology, if I had studied this before I invested in it, I would have realized it doesn't integrate with many of the other tools that I'm already using. So now I was caught up, by this shiny new piece of technology. And I made an impulse purchase without really understanding, is it going to communicate with other technologies I'm already using?
Right.
Is it truly going to streamline and automate what I'm doing already?
Correct.
So that's what I mean by not becoming a victim of the shiny object syndrome. And listen, these salespeople, they're great. They're great at their jobs. I mean, they will sell you the world, but you have to always go back, look at the specs that come along with that, whatever the technology is, and then go back and study the existing equipment and the existing technologies, software that you're already using, and look to see if it's truly compatible. Mm-hmm. That's what gets so many people caught up. They buy one thing only to realize it's incompatible with everything else they have. So now they have to upgrade all of this other stuff too.
And then somehow the original one they bought doesn't work because they upgraded the other one.
It's time consuming. It is very time consuming when you make a mistake like that. And I've seen this at very large Fortune 100 companies. Really? As well as the mom and pop organization. And you know what? The stakes are even higher when you get into those really big companies, because we're not talking about potentially spending, several $100s on something and, it didn't work out. Okay. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm telling you, it happens often. They invest in something and then they realize, this does not streamline our workflows. It is not streamlining our processes. It's actually making it even more cumbersome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's the biggest one in general. It's one of those, my mentor, we chat, and I was telling him at one point I want to be a coach, and he's like, well, how much are you going to charge like Coca-Cola? I was like, 100,000. He's like, no. If you're going to play with the big boys like that, $1 million is the minimum. And I'm like, that's such a waste of money. He's like, not to them. They feel like they're buying a lot. They feel like it's valuable because they're paying $1 million. And he's like, you could literally come in with a stick figure and be like, this is my plan. And they're like, genius. I'm like, okay.
Sadly, that's true. Sadly.
Right? I was listening to this one artist tell me, like, she literally drew a stick figure and charged them $1 million, and they're like, it's a Picasso, we gotta like mount this. And I'm like, no, they didn't. She's like, it was a concept, it wasn't the actual piece, and they paid me $1 million right there. And I'm like, what?
But there's the power of great branding. Right? If you can get inside the doors of one of those companies, go for it.
Right.
Go for it. Absolutely.
So I don't want to run you over. Like I said, we probably were going to do the hour and a half. So 2 going out questions. Okay. Other than work, what have you been doing in your free time to keep busy during these lockdown times?
Oh my gosh, I hardly have any free time, Josh. But you know what? I will tell you what I did this past weekend.
Okay.
I actually binged 2 different shows on Netflix, and both are about UFOs.
Ooh,
so one is called Hangar One. Ooh, okay. Check out Hangar One, HANGAR, and then the number 1. And the other one is actually a Netflix produced show. I think it's called the UFO Files or something like that.
Okay. I'll do a quick general search.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's just so fascinating. So not only did I binge them, but I watched them at least. I watched, especially Hangar One. I think I watched at least each episode 3 times. It was ridiculous.
What?
Because each time, I would catch something that I didn't catch before. Like, oh my gosh, that's so interesting. So yes, that's what I did most recently in my spare time.
Awesome. And then the second one, and then we'll send everyone your way, is what are some tips, tricks, or advice you would give someone to be like in your position, a successful woman running your business, doing what you like, watching movies on the weekend?
When she has time. So, Josh, I grew up, and I don't know if you can say the same thing, but I grew up always hearing this expression, reading, writing, arithmetic.
Yes.
Read something every day. Read, preferably a book. It's great to read, articles here and there, but if you really want to learn more about a particular topic, get a book. Read. Writing. Try to write something every single day. Get on LinkedIn, get on Facebook, Instagram, anything that allows you to be able to write something that's hopefully more than at least 1,000 characters, but just get into the habit of writing about what you are passionate about from a business perspective. And over time, people start to come to know you as the expert in whatever it is you're talking about. So get into that practice and habit. At first, it might seem like nobody's listening, nobody's paying attention, but I guarantee you it will pay off. It might take some time, but just keep doing it. And then lastly, arithmetic, measure something every day, even if it's just looking at the balance in your bank account. Get into the practice of measuring. What gets managed is what gets measured. So measure things, figure out all of those key metrics within your day-to-day operations, monitor those numbers. And if you see something trending up or trending down, depending on if that's a good or bad thing, it just helps make sure that you keep your eye on the prize and that you can be proactive instead of reactive as you see things trending in the wrong direction. So that's my advice.
It's brilliant. I love it. So now with that wonderful whimsical note, where can everyone contact you now to help them with their operations?
So my company is Equilibria. The website is eqbsystems.com. That's where you can find us.
All right. And I'll have an automated email to collect that information for you too.
Okay, great.
I love this. Can you definitely reschedule one in the future?
Absolutely. This was fun. Maybe we can talk about UFOs too.
Hey, I like it. I'm gonna have to watch and be like, all right, Angelica. I don't agree with this one, brother. What's your take?
That would be fun.
It would be. Well, congratulations. You made it to the end. You're an awesome person. Not many make it here. So, being the awesome person that you are, can you do me one more awesome favor? Can you rate and review this on whatever podcast services you're using? If you do it on Apple and you leave an actual written review, I have a thing on my website. I will take your written review and post it for all to see. Congratulations, you're permanently sealed on my site. Otherwise, I am trying to do YouTube more and live streaming. I will try to put as many of the YouTube links in the description of the show as I can. So give your boy some extra help over on YouTube. Watch my videos. I just mute it and change the channel, change the window or something. But yeah, that's it. Thank you for being awesome and see you next time.